Alright, this is part 4, I think so. Yes. Part 4 of the Big Ben 5A loud alarm clock rebuild, and we are removing the shuck pinion. And as you saw, I was trying to use an improvised hammer, which really didn't carry enough heft to the job. And so now I've got a small ball peen or riveting hammer to remove, and I'm also, instead of using my hand to hold the back end of the pliers up off, I'm using another pair of pliers. And so what I'm going to do is strike here to drive the pinion off of the center arbor. Okay, and that removed the pinion very nicely, as you can see, and with only a few whacks, sometimes it's a fallacy to use a hammer that's too small. You'll actually do more damage than if you used a hammer that was large enough. And unfortunately the plier did leave a few marks. I could have used a piece of cardboard between the pliers and the movement plate, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. So there's the front plate of the movement. And here's all the pieces of the clock so far disassembled, and there's the front of the case. Go ahead and set that aside. So now we can sort of take a look at the parts of the clock before cleaning and sort of checking the holes and the pivots to see if there's any kind of wear that needs to be addressed. And we'll start with the center arbor. This is the front pivot hole. And it actually fits pretty tight in there. So let's go to the back pivot. And that fits really well too. We're going to go to the third arbor next. That fits real nicely there. This is where it gets fun sometimes. That fits real nice. Good idea to pay attention to what the orientation is here. So this is the front pivot, and this is the back pivot. I'm holding the back plate. That's nice and tight. That's nice and tight. A little bit more critical is the escape wheel. So that fits in there fairly snug, where where there's just a little burr that's been raised up from where the wire was cut during manufacturing. Obviously not a problem there. Very snug fits in all these holes. About the verge. I'm not sure how the verge went in there. Try it both ways. I think it went this way. Yes. This is the back plate pivot. Okay. Very little wear in this movement. Very little wear. That's pretty amazing. Okay, so we have a few other bits of business to do. Let's sort of set some of these parts off to the side. And that's to remove the mainsprings. So all these parts are in pretty good shape and ready for cleaning. So we'll put those in a pile. These are parts I generally don't mess with cleaning. These parts over here, they can get a good wiping down with some alcohol or something to degrease them. Is the mainspring. We want to go ahead and remove the mainspring. And let's go ahead and very carefully put that back where it's supposed to go. Remove the winding square. Okay, we're going to take the spring out. Get enough of it up where it will stay up there and just work it out like this. And then be very careful unhooking the spring from the hook. Okay. These hooks sometimes are smashed down fairly tight to where they're pinching the spring. And you want to really not do anything at all to that hook, because if you bend it any, it might break off. Okay, we're going to remove the alarm spring from its spring box, and it's usually a good idea to remove the arbor first to get it unhooked. You can see the hook there, it's a pretty good size hook. And we can use a small screwdriver to get those separated. Sometimes you can rotate it backwards to get them unhooked, but more often or not, you've got to actually get them separated like that. And then so there's the alarm grate wheel. With that out of the way, we can remove the alarm spring from the spring box. It can sometimes be a little bit more frustrating to remove because it's a smaller spring that's still fairly stiff, and it will do things like this where it all just pulls out like that at once. And you don't want it to do that. You'd like to be able to sort of wind it out in the normal fashion like I did with the time side spring. Okay, oh, I almost had it. Almost had a coil on top of another coil there. That's what you need if you're going to try to wind a spring out of a barrel. Just to have one coil sitting on top of another coil. Like that, you see? Okay. Now, one disadvantage to removing a spring like this, and on this type of a clock it does not matter, but on some clocks it does matter, is it does cause the spring to be slightly conical, like here, but, you know, you can sort of work it back the other way, but it's really not going to make any difference for the alarm spring. As you can see, the time spring is still pretty flat. And that's probably the most critical. And you can see that the time spring is really quite a bit weaker of a spring than the alarm spring is. I mean, that's a fairly wide, stiff spring, whereas this time spring is pretty small. It's not a, for a American-made alarm clock, that is a pretty small spring. Whereas this alarm spring is pretty stout. Anyway, I believe that concludes this part. All the parts are going to get washed now in my standard clock cleaning solution, except for this guy. Except for the balance wheel is not going to get washed in the normal solution. It'll get cleaned separately, and we'll do a little bit of checking on these points and check for wear. And if we have to remove the hairspring to clean that up, I will, but it actually looks to be in pretty good condition, so we'll just clean it. And this is a very nice unmolested hairspring. It even has the bend in the end there like they're supposed to have. See that? And that might be distorted just a little bit, but not much. This is in pretty good shape. So no hairspring work needed on this clock. Anyway, so Oklahoma Bridges, and glad you were able to come along and follow along on this project, and thank you for watching. See you on the next episode.